Hey there guys, so today I'd like to talk to you about working memory. I used to think that working memory was the most boring type of memory and the most boring aspect of your cognitive ability that you could enhance with training. I have since reassessed that view. I think I was wrong. I actually think that working memory might be the single most important aspect of your cognitive ability that you can train. Hey, I'm entitled to change my opinion. So what is working memory? Let's start by looking at the traditional view laid out by Baddeley and Hitch. So they looked at memory as a whole by separating it into three different categories. You had your long-term memory, short-term memory, and working memory, not necessarily in that order. So the long-term memory is where you store your long-term memories, no surprise there, your biographical information, names of old friends, memories from school, things you've learned, etc. Stuff that you're just not going to forget. Then you've got your short-term memory, and that's where you store stuff that you're using, at the moment. You can retrieve it at will. You don't have to think about it all the time. However, you might forget it in the distant future. So this might be the name of a character in a film that you're watching. It might be the name of someone you're speaking to. It might be what you had for dinner yesterday. And then you've got your working memory, and this is essentially RAM according to Baddeley and Hitch's model. This is the shortest term memory, the memory that you use to hold numbers when you're performing long multiplications, when you're carrying a number across. If someone reads a phone number to you, you use your working memory to rehearse that number back to yourself so you can remember it whilst you go and grab a pen and write it down. That's the example that's constantly being used. So according to this traditional model, you would see something, you'd have to rehearse it, and the more you repeated it, the more likely it would be to get stored in short-term memory, and then with repeated use, further it would get stored in long-term memory. We now know that you can store memories for longer also if they're very important. You don't just have to rehearse them. If something's very important, you release more dopamine and adrenaline, and these help you to cement the memory more permanently via long-term potentiation, creating flashbulb memories. That's why, if you experience something very shocking, you don't have to repeat that to remember it because it's important to you. The emotions that were released make you encode that as long-term memory. But what we're interested in right now is that working memory, the RAM. So, according to Baddeley and Hitch, this can also be split down into multiple categories. You had your phonological loop, which is where you stored words and things, and you had your visual spatial scratch pad, which is where you would visualize stuff, etc. So the phonological loop is where you would literally repeat the number to yourself as you went to write it down. The visuospatial scratch pad is where you would visualize things. And there are ways that you could train your working memory and improve it. Traditionally, working memory was measured by how many units of information, how many numbers you could remember at any given time. And this is usually written as 7 plus or minus 2. So someone with a really great working memory can remember 9 numbers. Someone with a pretty poor working memory can remember 5, the average is about 7. You can train this using various different techniques. For instance, you can use chunking, which is essentially like a way of compressing files for your own brain. So here, if you had to remember 5 numbers, you would instead make it 2 numbers. So if you had to remember 7, 3, I'm doing this off the top of my head, 6, 9, 2, 7, 3, 6, 9, 2, you could instead remember it as 73, 692. I avoided the temptation of saying 69 there. The point being that you're now remembering a couple of things instead of lots of things. I think this is the first clue that Baddeley and Hitch's model isn't quite accurate, because if you're remembering something using a phonological loop, why does semantic chunking make any difference? I'm surprised that this theory had as much weight as it did for as long as it did, because really the brain doesn't store things arbitrarily in neat little boxes and categories. In fact, information will often be cross-modal. So more recent research has revealed that working memory is actually a lot more interesting than just where you can store numbers or the picture of something that you have to remember. So according to brain imaging studies, when you access your working memory, what you're actually doing is visualizing. So if you remember something in your working memory that is to do with something that you've seen, you actually activate parts of the visual cortex as though you were seeing it. When you use this phonological loop, you're actually activating your auditory cortex as though you're listening to it. And when you remember numbers, you're actually stimulating the same parts of the brain that you would stimulate when you were crunching numbers in real time. So really, working memory isn't RAM at all. Really, working memory is visualization. Working memory is your ability to internalize information and to picture it in your own mind. And then by doing that, you can hold on to that information even though it's not there in the real world anymore. You're concentrating on those brain areas that you lit up, either from an idea that you had, something you remembered, or something that you'd seen or heard. And this makes working memory incredibly powerful, far beyond writing down phone numbers. 7 plus or minus 2 is meaningless, because you're using working memory when you're playing a sport and remembering where everyone is on the pitch at any given time to pass to. You're using your working memory when you're in conversation and you're remembering what the context of that conversation is, what people have said so far, what you're going to say back to them, their name. So in just those two examples, working memory is making you wittier, it's improving your spatial awareness and your athletic performance. Working memory is also, of course, what you use for multitasking. There's no such thing as multitasking, really. You can't separate your consciousness into two parts. That's probably something to look at. So what you're really doing is called serial tasking, which is where you just switch from one task to another. And in order to do that, you need to be able to hold information from the previous task in your working memory, which is an anachronistic way of saying it, as we've discovered. What you're really doing is just visualizing, using those same parts of your brain, what you were doing, concentrating on it, so that you can switch to another task and then switch back and still have that information available in your brain for you to access and continue with that other task. So really, every aspect of your mental and your social and your athletic performance relies on this working memory, on your ability to internalize information and to visualize. And if you've watched my video on embodied cognition, then you'll know that possibly all of human consciousness comes from this ability, from our ability to look at our own bodies and our experience in the world and use that to understand the world around us. So if you can enhance your working memory, you can enhance all these skills. This is the closest thing you're going to get to a limitless style upgrade. So how do you do it? Well, outdated though some notions of working memory might be, you can still use the old-fashioned training methods. They will still work. So the most famous one is the dual NBAC test. This is a test that has you remembering two different things at once and then watching for patterns and seeing when they reoccur. You're basically just practicing using your working memory because you're holding that information in your mind whilst trying not to be distracted. Playing chess can also improve your working memory because what you're doing is you're visualizing the moves ahead and you're remembering all the places on the board that you've occupied and that your opponent's occupied, etc. Again, it's all about holding information in your brain. It doesn't have to be memory even, it can be an idea or future information. I don't know, you know what I mean. And another one you can use, of course, is the old pairs memory game that you perhaps used to play with your mum, because I used to play it with my mum, so maybe you played it with your mum. So matching pairs, of course, requires you to remember where all the cards are and what's on the bottom of them all, and that is using your working memory again. Cheers. I thought drinking tea mid-video would make me look clever or something. It's actually just awkward, isn't it? But the most interesting and the most powerful way to train your working memory, of course, is with meditation. So studies show that working memory correlates a lot with your ability to focus your attention. The bottleneck on your ability to use your working memory is whether or not you can focus on that and keep those areas of the brain active, or whether you're going to be distracted by other thoughts and other things going on around you, which is a bigger and bigger challenge in today's modern world. So meditation has been shown in studies to boost your IQ and specifically to boost your working memory. And this makes a lot of sense because what meditation is really is practiced focus. What you do when you meditate is you practice on blotting out distractions and focusing on your breathing, on a mantra, on your dantian, or just on nothingness. So it's you literally taking control over your mind and deciding what you want to focus on. So of course it makes sense that this would correlate with improved working memory. I've actually been looking into meditation more and more lately. It's something I'm definitely going to cover on this channel, but I need to get more practice in myself before I start giving advice on it because I am definitely very new to it. But the evidence can't be ignored. Meditation is pretty much a huge mental upgrade. And yes, so stay tuned for more on that. And of course, for more on all of the stuff that I tend to talk about, so brain training, nootropics, productivity, technology, bodybuilding, weightlifting, strength, parkour, martial arts, you name it. If that sounds interesting, then stay tuned, maybe subscribe. If you'd like this video, then that would help me a great deal, and maybe leave a comment down below because I love discussing this stuff with you guys. Thanks a ton for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.